Welcome to this episode of End of Life Conversations. I'm Reverend Wakil David Matthews.
And I'm the Reverend Mother, Ana Luisa Armendariz. In this podcast, we share people's experiences with death and dying, grief and loss, and the end of life.
Every episode, we are so honored and blessed to share stories with amazing, compassionate, and wise guests. So let's get started.
In this episode, we look forward to a conversation with Lynn Rovig. Lynn contacted us to say that she had a story to tell about her work as a home care consultant with a Seattle area organization called Home Instead. Lynn has been working with seniors for 24 years. She has worked with many people in hospice care, and on a personal note, Lynn's parents died in the last few years.
Lynn notes that dealing with her own parents' death has helped her with her hospice clients in a compassionate and very rewarding way. She offers a harmonious blend of compassion, sensitivity, creativity, and empathy with professionalism, quality assurance, and law. We love it when folks reach out with their stories, so please follow her example and let us know if you'd like to join us sometime.
Hello, Lynn.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
It's really good to have you. Thanks for reaching out. When did you first become aware of death, Lynn?
So my grandmother on my dad's side, his mother, all of a sudden she was there and then she wasn't. And what I mean by that is apparently she was very sick, but she kept it from the family, including her own son. And one day I was asking about her and they said, oh, she passed away. So as I was around 13 years old and I was just baffled by that. It was just very disturbing that it was like, there she is, and then she's gone. And no one would talk about it. And what I found is that a lot people just don't want to talk about death. They're very uncomfortable with it. And I feel like I'm comfortable because of that experience. What that led me to do was I started reading about life. I was just very interested in what does this life mean? And I was only 13, but the first book I read that really hit me was The Religions of Man. I started reading that and looking into other faiths, and it led me to just have I wanted to get an understanding of life and what it means to be here. So I have always gotten along with older people. My grandparents were my refuge. I would go over there just to hang out throughout my life. And older people I've always enjoyed them more than my own age group because of their wisdom and their stories. And that led me to work with them. And it started out as a fluke where I just needed a part-time job on the weekends. And so I started working at a retirement community as a receptionist. And I did so well with them that they moved me up into management. And I was the resident service director, which was so rewarding. I acclimated new residents to the community. I planned events. And I experienced death there. And there was one story that just really hit me. Her name was Janet, and she was on death's door. And we were really close because she gave me her 30-year Alcohol Anonymous chip because I had been sober for that many years. And so we were really close. And I remember her sister said, Janet wants to see you. Talk to Janet. And Janet was lying there dying. And I whispered in Janet's ear and I said, Janet, I'll see you on the other side, and thank you for the chip. And she actually smiled. So I don't know if the correct word is comfortable, but I've always been it hasn't bothered me to be around people who are dying. I feel like it's just sort of my calling, because what happened, what led into that was that the working with seniors continued, in that I was let go from that retirement community position, and then I went into home care. And with that, I sell services to families and seniors so that everyone can have peace of mind and, stay at home. So again, we had a lot of clients that were hospice clients, and what the families liked about me was that I was willing to talk about it with them. I was saying, like with the client who was dying, I said, how are you feeling right now? Are you scared? Can you tell me more about it? And I found that the families really were surprised that I did that. They said nobody really talks about death like that, and some of them really appreciated it. And what I found too is that I was able to get them to really feel the emotions of grief. I wasn't afraid to say, I know this is really hard. Tell me about it. And they would cry, and the men especially would get kind of not mad at me, but they'd go, "Oh, now look what you're making me do. I'm crying." And I said, "Well, tears are healing. Tears are good for you." And what happened was, with my mom passed away, and I was really close to her. I actually lived with her before she died. And everyone told me, "I don't think you should go back to work. I don't think you can do it." But what I found was that because I had been through hospice and I had been through watching her die, I was even better at my job because I could really relate to the daughters and the sons and say, well, she's going to have some, you might find her, grasping in the air, or she might be pulling at her covers. And I was able to really give them a blow by blow playlist of what they're going to have to expect. And then my dad passed away, and it further increased my understanding, because again, I was able to talk about with people, this is really hard. You're going to go through, you're going to have grief brain. You're going to experience different, all these dynamics from your family are going to come up. And what I found was that my experience with dealing with it personally just made everything so much easier for me to do my job. It brought me the sense of connection that I had never had before. And the families would often say to me, we appreciate that you're talking about this. But what I found too is that families often would say to, like, the widow, they'd say, "Okay, mom, he's been dead 5 years. You need to get over it." And I would very gently say, well, grief has no timeline, and you need to feel what you need to feel. And I'll never forget, one woman was so defeated because her family kept saying, "Move on, move on, move on." And I suggested to her that she write in a journal, because I've had a journal that I write every day nonstop. I've been doing it for 40 years. And journal writing just really helps. I often suggest that. And the woman that, where her family was saying, "Move on, move on," when I left, she was sitting up straighter, she was brighter, and she looked at me and she said, "Thank you so much for honoring my feelings. Thank you for making me feel like a person." And that just really touched me.
Well, it sounds like you've been doing this good work for a while. And this is your current work right now that you're talking about, that you've been doing this in home.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I would just say that, going back to what you were looking for, when you said comfort around death, I would say also ease. The ease around spending time with people who are transitioning, the ease with which you have to bear witness to what's occurring and share that with those who are around that person who's passing. And that tells us that death has been woven into all of these experiences for so many years. It's really an amazing story.
Yeah.
And I love to tell this story because, well, let me first say, I feel like God has granted me the gift of discernment, if you look at it that way. And also, I look at myself as a highly sensitive person, an empath. So I often can walk into a home and I know exactly what to do. But this experience with this hospice client was very uncanny, because I walked in and it was a son and his mother, and she was on hospice. So she was sitting up, but she couldn't talk, and she had to be fed through like a feeding tube. And I said to the son, I said, "I get the feeling that she really likes Sound of Music." And he goes, Well, you're absolutely right. She does. I go, well, let's play some songs for her. So we put on So Long Farewell from The Sound of Music, and we were both dancing. And this woman who could not speak and was, and everyone said, oh, she's dying, she's not coherent. She laughed. She laughed out loud. And that was probably the most meaningful, joyful time or experience I've had being around someone who's on hospice.
Beautiful.
They really can hear and they are aware.
Right. Yes. Very good. That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that story. That's really fun and so indicative too of something we don't believe or we don't know or we don't think about, that they really are there even beyond the end. I was listening to a podcast recently that was talking to somebody who works with the end of life, and she said, I think people are actually still listening even after after they've passed away. So there's time to come and say goodbye, all the way into the times after they've left.
Yeah.
Ana Luisa.
Yeah, and just to speak to that too, there's so many cultures around the world who spend 3 days around the body because that's the number that they perceive that spirit is still hovering or clinging. And I think that's a really good thing to note, because some people think it's just over and done and that's it. But we don't know. And there might be a huge chance, like everybody's just lingering and waiting for directions maybe at times. But anyhow, yes, Lynn, what are the biggest challenges that you encounter with the work that you're doing these days?
So I think the biggest challenges are the fact that people aren't comfortable talking about death. And a lot of them are in denial. And so I have to kind of weigh the situation and not be too forthcoming, but allude to it, but not actually come out and say, well, your mom's dying and it's going to be only a couple days, because I can usually tell. Like, I'll tell my staff at work, I'll say, this client has about 4 more days, and I'm always correct. So I have a sense of when they're going to pass. So being honoring people's truth, not everyone wants to face it. The other challenge I've found is some clients choose, death with dignity. They want to choose when they go. And I find that some of the staff members are really uncomfortable with that because they feel like it's against their faith, or, it's just not right to do that. And I experienced it with a client, and I really admired her for it, because she said, I just don't want to suffer. I want to be able to go when I want to be able to go. And the caregiver that was assigned to her was very comfortable with it. She asked for her to come, which I thought was just so deep and meaningful, that she liked her caregiver so much. And the caregiver brought her a white rose, and she transitioned and left, and the caregiver was there. But the last time I talked to this client, I said to her, thank you so much for the honor of knowing you, and I will see you on the other side. And we both cried, and it was very, very touching. And so when my coworkers expressed their concern or discomfort, I gave them that story about how beautiful it was that I was able to say goodbye to her in that way.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, we've been blessed with some great stories of people who've had that option and have taken it and have had parties, before they died, because, they can do that,
They can plan ahead.
Yeah, and the whole kind of intentionality of having people there with you and knowing that this is the time and that you've chosen this time yourself. It's very beautiful, and it's really giving agency to people in their end times, which I think is really important. Mm-hmm. So thank you for sharing that story. That's really right.
Yeah. You know what it just occurred to me, Wakil and Lynn, is that we offer the choice of giving birth to women who are pregnant. They can choose a natural timeline or a cesarean section, which is a planned birth. So what is it that we're so upset about with end of life. Like people can choose to just die naturally, or they can also choose the moment with which they leave. So it just struck me like, we have a reticence towards giving people the freedom to choose at the end of life. So just a thought.
Which reminds me again of this podcast that I'm hoping to get this person on our call here at some point that I was listening to. We actually are speaking to the person who was interviewing her tomorrow, but I was listening to her podcast, and this woman said, I call it labor at the end of life.
It is labor.
She said it's labor. It's the same thing, and you can watch people going through that, and it's a very similar process. It really is remarkable, all of the different parallels there are, as you said, Ana Luisa, to end of life and beginning of life. Surprise, surprise.
Mm-hmm. Surprise, surprise. It's a circle. It's a circle. It's a circle.
I wanted to bring up also what was so interesting about both my parents' death was all three of us children were there at the end. And with both my mother and father, I had to go. I didn't want to see the last breath. I couldn't do it. So, you know what? Both my parents were so kind to me because what they did was they waited until I left, both of them. It's like they knew. The minute I left, that's when they both gave their last breath. So they waited for me. And I just found that to be really interesting that they both of them waited until I left, and it was like seconds after I left. Then they both said, "Okay, I'm ready to go."
That happened with my dad too, and the hospice worker at the time said it's quite common that people will wait till the loved ones have left the room because they know that they just need to do that on their own. What do you need to feel supported, or what kind of tools do you have to stay supported and grounded in your work?
So the journal writing really helps. I do that. And then I read books on grief, a lot of books on grief. And I have to commend Providence Hospice because they gave me such good grief support. And so that really helps. And also, I do a lot of research on death and reading. I find that the knowledge is very powerful for me. And also just being very self-aware. I was so angry after my father died. It was hard, but I was very angry, and I let myself go through that because I know that's just part of the process of grieving, and I accepted it, and now I'm not mad anymore. I woke up one day, I prayed, of course, and I pray all the time. That prayer is probably my biggest support. I pray before I walk into a home. I say, Lord, please give me the wisdom to know what to say. Please allow me to help. And the prayer before the client going into the client's home has really helped too. I think that's where the discernment comes in. And before I forget, I wanted to bring up another with my grandmother. She and I talked about death a lot when she was dying, and she didn't talk to anyone else about it. So I felt very honored that she would share with me. And what she shared with me was that she had out of body experience. And she goes, I've never told anyone this, but this is what happened when I was on the operating table. I rose above and I saw. And I actually gave her permission to go. She looked at me she had such sorrow in her eyes. And I said to her, you're ready to go, aren't you? And she couldn't speak then because she had a stroke, and she shook her head yes. And I said, it's okay if you want to go. And that was a very, very touching, and I don't know how to explain how deep that was to experience that with her. And I spoke at her eulogy. She asked, or at her funeral, she asked me to. She goes, I want you to be up there. And I did at my mom's also. And everyone said, how can you go up there and speak and not be a total wreck? But there was something in me that said, I need to give these two people I love, I need to share their stories out loud. And I was able to do it. And then I cried at the end, but I was able to carry through. And I feel like that's just God and what I feel like I'm being put here to do that, to talk about death, to make people feel at ease. I feel like that's my purpose.
That's a beautiful purpose. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Very good. I'm so glad you're here doing that work.
Yes. And Lynn, so I sense that you're really comfortable with this conversation. And do you have any fears about the end of life for yourself?
Well, it's interesting you would bring that up because, yes, recently I was experiencing some health issues. I was having shortness of breath, and I thought, well, that's just anxiety, I thought. But it was happening where I would walk, just like get up and walk into my kitchen, and I was out of breath. So I went to the doctor for a workup and explained, I'm scared, I have shortness of breath. And what I found was, in Western medicine, they do all these tests so that they can rule everything out. And I'm more of a proponent of, alternative medicine like acupuncture and Ayurvedic medicine. So I wasn't going to my Western doctor, but it gave me a health scare. And I thought, because if you go on the internet and read about all these tests, they always say cancer, cancer, cancer. That's like the big C. And both my parents died from cancer, so I've always kind of had a fear of that. So I really had to sit and face and say, this might be my last time. And while I'm not afraid of dying, I'm not afraid where I'll go, or I was just afraid that I have too much more to do, is what I was worried about. I want to share my gifts. I want to continue to make a difference every day. I don't want to leave yet. I still need to write my book. I still need to help others. And that was my biggest fear, was I'm not ready yet. I have a purpose here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a lot of us feel that way when it rises up. It's like, wait. Not yet, please.
Not yet. I still have to write something down.
I didn't
Yes.
tell everybody where my passwords are. Yeah.
Or any number of those, for sure.
Yeah. So have you found a way that you are supported around that fear? Are you doing something to help you work through that?
Well, I believe God brings the bad in so that we can see the good. And with this health scare, I realized that I had this ultra independent, I can do it, I don't need help attitude. And I was pushing people away, including my family. And I was saying how alone I feel. And I actually was doing that to myself, because my sister, who is a nurse, I reached out to her and I said, it was very difficult for me, but I put the vulnerability out there and I said, I am so scared. Can you help me get through all these tests and what is going on? And, everyone has their power and their way of making a difference. And hers is with helping us and the family through our health scares and understanding what's going on. And she just opened herself and said, I'm here for you. And I told her how much I really appreciate you. There's a real love now and closeness that I had been pushing away before. And so I realized that I need to be more vulnerable and ask for help. Just because I give help all the time, I need help too. And so I'm starting to be like my clients and say, I need help. I'm overwhelmed. And I'm reaching out more to family and letting people know that I'm not so strong. And so I feel like what's going on, this health issue, it turns out I need to get a hiatal hernia removed. It's blocking my breathing. But there was just a lot of tests and a lot of trying to figure out what was going on. And when you're going through health issues like that, it's very scary. I can see why some of our clients can get cranky sometimes and angry, and I see why. I mean, I understand. You're so scared and vulnerable. So,
Yeah, that's great insight. And again, I love that you are looking at this kind of frightening scary health issue as a lesson, as a way to learn, and a way to be more empathetic to your clients and to be more aware of what you need. That's really important, and I'm glad that you brought that in. That's really an important reminder to all of us.
It is. It's like, and I like how you're treating it as a lesson, right? It's a lesson plan for your future clients.
For all of us.
Yes.
For all of us. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how do you keep yourself resourced? I heard that you pray. That's a really big tool that you use to continue to keep feeling rejuvenated and can do your work. Is there anything else that you do?
Well, I really like the Alzheimer's Association. I read up a lot on Alzheimer's and dementia because we have a lot of clients that have that. And again, it's interesting because Alzheimer's and dementia clients are actually my favorite because what they have taught me is that we need to listen more and we need to be quiet and not talk so much. And we need to slow down. Take everything with them is minute by minute. And I had one client that was trying to speak and he was taking a long time and he said, "I'm sorry." And I said, "No, sir." I go, "You have taught me so much just right now." I told him, I said, "I'm learning to listen and to be slower. And you're teaching me so much." And he started crying. And again, it's just, my goal is just to always honor everyone, no matter where they are. I don't even know if that answered your question, but I think going back and thinking of the stories that I have and experiences I've had, and to be blessed to have a job that isn't a job. I absolutely love what I do. It's a joy to get up and do this. And not everyone can say that. I feel incredibly blessed and fortunate that I can say that. And I would do this even if I didn't get paid, but don't tell my boss.
I love that. I just went and visited with a friend who is pretty far deep into dementia and didn't really know that I was there, I don't think. But there was, I love what you said about just being so patient and just being willing to be in silence. And that's what we did. We just sat with her in silence. And every once in a while she'd look over and see us and kind of grin, and then she'd go back into herself, just that sense of presence, being willing to be present with somebody and not having to fill it with talk or chatter or and thinking it's not okay if they're not talking, and just being willing to be with them where they are. It's such a great reminder. Thank you, Lynn.
Yes.
Well, and it really is a love language with them. They feel energy. I had an experience where this woman talked, it's called gibberish, scrambled egg talking. She couldn't talk very well. And I went in there and I was feeling sad that day. I said, "Oh, I'm lonely. I wish I had someone in my life, a life partner, someone." And do you know that she looked at me and said, clear as a bell, she said, "Don't worry, he's going to come soon." I mean, that was that was just uncanny that I swear there's like some connection. And then another time, someone who talked like that took my hands in hers and she said, "I like you so much." She said it just as clear as that.
Wow.
That's lovely.
That's beautiful.
And then one other one said to me, I love how they can be very poetic. She says, "When you're around, the lights are brighter," she said.
Oh, wow.
That's a gift. Mm-hmm.
Right.
I may be getting off the topic of death, but I think with working with older people, I don't have a fear of aging or going through life because I see so many dynamic individuals. I don't think that age means that you have to give up. I think you can just persevere and learn and move on. They teach me so much.
It's so beautiful.
That's wonderful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, we're close to the end of our time, but is there anything you wish we had asked you?
No, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was my honor to be here.
Well, we were blessed by you and your wonderful insight. And as you said, your sense of empathy and discernment, all those things. we're so glad there are people like you out there doing this work.
That's right.
So thank you for asking us to be on the show. We really have appreciated having you, and hopefully we'll be in touch, and maybe I'll see you at the concert next week.
Okay.
And Louisa, anything else?
No, I think this has been so wonderful. And what I hear very clearly is you knowing exactly what your life mission is and the gifts that have been given to you by God. And you're stepping into them, and you want to share what you know to make all of us get to that transition place with joy in our hearts.
Amen. Yeah. Well, we like to end with a poem or a quote, and Lynn has picked this scripture, so I'll let her read it.
Proverbs 3:13. Blessed is the one who finds wisdom and the one who gets understanding.
Indeed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lynn.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having this great show.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for all the work you're doing and continuing that work, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks so much for joining us on the End of Life Conversations. We appreciate you and look forward to sharing our stories. Thanks to my daughter Lucero and Nico Rush, who have cheerfully assisted us as our editors and tech support. Additional resources, transcript of this episode, and links to our social media will be in the podcast notes.
Yeah, thank you so much. And please subscribe, tell your friends, follow us on social media, and consider supporting us through Patreon. We want to acknowledge that the music we are using was composed and produced by Charles Heastand.